Welcome back to my channel, guys. Tonight I am joined by Brett R. Smith of Marvel fame and now Jawbreakers fame. And how are you, my friend?
Good. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course, I appreciate you coming on. I know John and connection through John Malin really, or Malin, however.
Yeah.
I don't know. He's never told me how he pronounces it.
Yeah. That's the benefit of being a Smith. There's no ambiguity there. But yeah, I don't know if it's Malin or Malin. I've always just called him Malin. But yeah, and he hasn't corrected me either. So, that's funny, though. I'll have to ask him next time I talk to him.
Yeah, because you kind of get hooked into one way of saying it, and then the person's just like, I'm so used to hearing these people fuck my name up. I'm just gonna let them do it.
At least it's not like, it's at least not like Bill Sienkiewicz. And I still don't even know if that's the right way you say it. So I have no idea whatsoever.
Not in the slightest.
No, so that's another reason why it's the benefit of being a Smith is it's easy peasy. That's why I put the R in there, frankly,
To add a little flair.
Yeah, to stand out somewhat, it's because it's like, all of us Smiths are basically related to each other. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a very extremely common name, like Malin or Malin. I've never seen it,
I know. So it's like I always tell people, I'm like, yeah, my family are all blacksmiths. That's as a joke. So because it's just so generic. But anyway, yeah, John's a great guy. So and such a fantastic artist. And we've had a lot of fun, and we're not even halfway through the book, so there's more fun to be had.
Yeah, and so out of curiosity, since you brought that up, how closely do you and him work on the art? Is he, when he gets done with something, is he sending it over to you, and then you kind of just take it and run with it and your coloring?
Yeah, he and Richard, I would imagine, would probably work doing roughs. And then John goes to the inked page, and John sends Richard and I, both JPEGs when he finishes a page. And I've never really had any art direction for John because he's just done a fantastic job. John, when I color the page, John will give me a couple little notes here and there if he sees something, which I appreciate. It's always nice to have kind of some fresh eyes on the page, because when you work on something for a long time, you spend a half a day or a day working on a page, you just become less and less subjective about it because you've been just staring at it all day long. So that's one of the reasons I always like to wake up the next morning and take a look at it, because it's been 8 or 10 hours since I've looked at it, and I can kind of objectively look and say, this is good, but I'm going to change this, and this, just to tighten it up. And John frequently, or not frequently, I would say probably maybe once every so often will say, can you tweak this and tweak this? Otherwise, amazing. So he's always been, through the entire project, he's been really supportive and really great to work with. And, fortunately, I'm elevating his work, which is my job. That's ultimately the colorist's job, is to take what the penciler and the inker give me and plus it, which is something Walt Disney used to say to all of his animators. He would say, okay, this background for Snow White is beautiful and amazing, and it's fantastic, but how do we plus it? How do we make it better? How do we take it to that next level? Because a lot of the time, it doesn't take a whole lot of effort necessarily to take it to the next level. It's just really kind of going back over the details and fine-tuning things, which might take, for me, 10 or 15 minutes. But it's the difference between a good page and an exceptional page. So it's always worth the extra effort.
Yeah, and it shows on even just the panels that you guys have released. It shows what like John's line work plus your coloring. It's just, it pops, and it's one of those things where you never really think about it as a consumer looking at a completed book that you bought, or a completed comic, and you're like, you don't see the huge difference a good colorist plus a good line and inker come together to make, because you don't usually see them separately, or one without.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I like in a lot of the trades and the graphic novels that I've bought over the years, one in particular is the Batman Year One graphic novel, which is it's like a hardcover, and Bruce Timm did the I think the cover. It's in fact, I'm looking at it right now, but it's got I would say anywhere from 15 to 20 pages in the back, which is all roughs, and all the pages broken down into their their essence along the creative process. So you have Frank Miller's scripts, which have like coffee stains and stuff all over them, and then you've got the roughs from David Mazzucchelli, and then you've got the actual watercolors, which oh gosh, what was her name? Oh, it's killing me. I gotta look. Anyway, it's got everything broken down so you can see the process, and in that sense, that's really kind of the only way that I know of, to really show people what we do. Otherwise, it's way too abstract. If you can't show them like a visual of the line art next to a fully colored page, there's no way of trying to to explain that to somebody. But when they do see that, and not just the line art to the color, but let's just say a rough pencil to an inked page, that often is a big leap. And sometimes not. You guys got guys out there like Graham Nolan and Paul Ravoche who do these these beautiful roughs, which are not really roughs. They're like finished pencils, and even then, when they ink them and they're obviously ready to be photographable, and they're refined and all the blacks are filled in. No matter how nice those finished pencils are, those beautiful inks, that's kind of the whole process of comics, is you're constantly elevating the project from one step to the next, obviously to come out with the best visual possible, as far as the end result, and even the lettering. That's I never appreciated letterers until I produced Clinton Cash, a graphic novel, and had to work with a letterer with a lot of dialogue and a lot of narrative on that book. That's a real delicate art. It's a real delicate balance of not stepping on the art, which is something that I am very also mindful when I color, not to step on the art, not to be too heavy-handed with it. Certainly there are times where you have to do that because the art is garbage, so it's like you got to do everything. You're essentially polishing a turd, and I've polished a lot of turds over the years. But at the same time, I've also been really fortunate to work with guys where I didn't really have to do much of anything. Guys like Frank Cho and Walt Simonson and Alan Davis, where you just kind of like, you just pick some nice colors and you do some light rendering and some light effects. Guys like Jerry Ordway, I mean, you just don't have to do anything with those guys. So you let the artwork just completely breathe. Other people, it's just such a shit show that you have to jump in there and really make something that it's not. And with Photoshop, that's what you can do now, which is kind of unfortunate in a lot of ways. You weren't really able to do that back in the days when we were using traditional mediums. The artwork really had to stand on its own. And it's another area where the digital has dumbed down the industry in a lot of ways. Not just in the sense that any asshole can go out there and learn Photoshop and learn how to color comics and say, oh, I'm a comic artist. It's like, no, you're not.
Well, and you started in the day and age of using hard like pencils and everything, right? Like true. Yeah. So you started before digital was pushed.
Yeah. I started in the mid 90s, and we were still using markers and gouache and airbrush and all kinds of traditional mediums. And, it was a bitch, the setup and the cleanup, and it sucked. Buying markers and refilling them, it was not fun. However, you really had to be an artist in order to do that stuff. You had to have technique, and you had to understand the fundamentals of design, composition, color theory. You just couldn't be some joker off the street. You really had to be somebody who put a lot of time and effort into your craft. in order to, you know, get published work, to become like an actual journeyman where you're actually working at it. So as much as I love the digital stuff for all the things that were a pain in the ass about traditional mediums, you know, it really has in a lot of ways made people lazy, you know, and and then on top of that, it's kind of like this shortcut. Instead of going to school and learning composition and the fundamentals of design and color theory and doing life drawing, for instance, it's, you know, and understanding how light hits a figure and fabric and yeah, I mean, you know, everything that's involved in you know, in creating you know, or reinterpreting the model when you're life drawing, you know, all of that time rendering and practicing rendering is all funneled into how you color, because coloring is essentially digital painting, and the same fundamentals and techniques largely apply with the digital. You're just not, I don't have to clean out an airbrush at the end of the day, and which was a real pain in the ass, and clean up gouache splattered all over the place. And, you know, it's a mess. And it's also expensive. You know, it was really expensive having to buy all these markers. We were using like Pantone markers back in the day, which were alcohol based, and they're expensive. Those tri-tips, they're really expensive. So, you know, so I mean, that's nice. And it's nice to be able not to have to rush to FedEx to send a bunch of 11 by 17 artwork, you know, before the cutoff. I mean, even when I was working at Hi-Fi, I lived on the east side of Phoenix. Hi-Fi was on the west side, and we could extend our deadline during the day if I would drop off, because we were still mailing CDs to DC. This is back in like 2003. DC was owned by Time Warner at the time, and yet we were still FedExing CDs with pages, with TIFFs to DC. So on the west side of Phoenix, the FedEx guy would pick up at like noon. But if I, you know, and I lived on the east side, so I would drive home, and we had like till 5 o'clock in the afternoon, which is like a big, you know, that's a big window, right? So I'd have to leave by like 4 in order to hit FedEx on the east side. But, you know, it would give us an extra couple hours to work, and, you know, so we could, you know, finish stuff or do last minute corrections or whatever. So, but I mean, it was crazy back then. We were literally using UPS and FedEx and shipping stuff back and forth. You know, nowadays it's all FTP transfer, and even then some. You can basically use WeTransfer and all these websites, and even email now to send really large files. So yeah, it was just a different time, man.
With digital and any way of condensing down files, I mean, it's ridiculous on how much we don't, and the new breed of drawers and colorists and stuff that don't know what it's like to have to push through that part of the industry and dealing with that. Do you think the shift of that is why you see a huge paradigm shift in the actual whole industry when it comes to the pushing of narratives and being more focused on, you know, a person's, you know, sexual orientation versus what they're actually capable of?
Yeah, you know, it's allowed people who in the 80s and 90s would have never broken into the industry based on merit to get into the industry. You know, some of these jokers that are in the industry right now, they would have never been taken seriously back in the 80s or in the 90s, because they just don't have the chops necessary to compete on that kind of a level. Some of these people aren't even, I wouldn't even consider them, you know, B team. You know, they're not even semi-pro ball. You know, Marvel and DC are the majors. I mean, those, you know, that's basically like playing in the major leagues. You know, Dark Horse and Image and some of these guys, it's kind of like, you know, the minors or the B team, because they're just smaller. But you work your way up through those guys. You know, I kind of did that. You know, I started out of Chaos, but then I went back to school and learned computers. And then once I got out of college, I went to work at Hi-Fi. So, and, you know, and we were working on 12 Marvel titles, and I think at least half a dozen DC titles at the time. So I was just kind of dropped in the middle of all of this. And fortunately, I had guys like Brian Buccellato and Jason Keith and Val Staples and Brian Miller to help me and it kind of reteach me how to color, because I had come from the traditional medium, and then I learned computers. But really, the hi-fi had their own way of coloring, and so they kind of had, and then and I had kind of had my own way of doing it, which I had figured out because I used to hang out with Mark Nichols and Todd Broker and Jay. These guys used to work for McFarlane, and and they would show me how they were coloring pages, which was similar to how hi-fi did it, but hi-fi had kind of a little bit different way of doing it. There's probably 3 or 4 different ways that you can color a comic book page in Photoshop, and they all work largely exactly the same. I happen to like to use channels to float my line art. Other people like to use the mask and the layers and stuff, but I was taught a certain way, and that was the hi-fi way. Somebody asked me the other day, is there a good book out there to learn about coloring for comics? And I would recommend Brian and Christy Miller's, coloring for comics, the hi-fi Studios way. They have a couple different books out on coloring for Photoshop, and Brian's probably got one of the most bulletproof ways of doing it, and he also teaches you fundamentals and rendering and stuff like that. As much as you can do that in a tutorial. Obviously, you still need talent. That's another thing that's really important. You can have the schooling and everything, and that's fine, and you can be fluent in traditional methods and mediums and understand composition, but you also have to have talent. And then on top of that, you've also got to have something called a work ethic. You've got to be willing to to really put your nose to the grindstone and just grind it out, because a lot of people say it takes 10 years to break into comics. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if there's necessarily an average. If you're talented and you work your ass off and you're persistent, you can break in. It's
and with the fact that it's kind of you have to have some sort of skill and everything else. What I was wondering is, did you go for classical training, like traditional school, or did you start out on your own and just work your way through the industry? How'd you end up?
Yeah, I've been drawing and doing art and stuff since I was 3 or 4 years old. Basically, my folks always told me that once I could hold a pencil, I was drawing. And I was a big comic book reader. I started reading early because I went to Montessori, and they taught us phonics. They taught us how to read phonetically. So I was reading comics that I would buy at the grocery store. My mom would buy me. And then that got me reading books really early. The first book I ever read was The Outsiders, because I had seen the movie, and then we were in a bookstore one day, and I saw the book, and I was like, oh, I want, and I saw this beautiful book cover done by Drew Struzan, which was I think it was very similar to the movie poster. Probably was the movie poster. So I started reading books early. So comics are a great way to get kids reading, essentially, and to keep them reading, frankly. But I was just amazed at these stories and this artwork. So my mom bought me How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, which is a great book. It's kind of the Bible for learning figure drawing and whatnot in comics. And I would trace a lot. I would trace the figures by John Buscema in that book, and other comics I would trace, and then I would try and draw them myself. And then just over the years, I did that Marvel Comics tryout, which was like this big 11 by 17 book where you could write a story, pencil, ink, and color and letter. And then, you could mail it into Marvel, as kind of like, it was sort of like this submission. It was sort of this all-in-one submission book. It was actually really fantastic. It's about $20. And I did the coloring, and I remember somebody, the guy I was working for at the time, Neil Kotler, who owned Planet Comics, which was one of the largest comic book chains in Scottsdale, Arizona. He said, you don't want to be a writer, so you didn't write anything. He said your pencils are okay. He said your inking sucks, which it did. And he said your colors are really good. And at the time, I had colored this Spider-Man story, which was on the interior of this Marvel Comics tryout. And I just used colored pencils because that's all I had at the time. But I just, I opened up comics at the time and I looked at what they were doing, and I just kind of emulated with the colored pencils, some of the, just sort of basic shading and stuff and the color choices. So what all the guys at the comic store who were really critical at the time, I mean, this was like the old school comic store that was sort of like the water cooler where everybody would talk shit all day long and argue.
Yeah, it wasn't a we're gonna kick you out of our store because you have a pull list that has a book on it.
No, this was more, everybody loved to argue in this store. So everybody, this was old school comic stores where it wasn't like they shut out opinions. They actually loved people to come in and start arguments or discussions. Discussions that would typically lead into arguments, and then we would all agree to disagree. And this guy also had that Capcom Marvel game at the time. Then we would just be like, fuck it, we're done arguing. We're gonna go fight. It's time to go fight. We're gonna go fight in the Marvel game. So we go play the Marvel game and we fight. And I was always Wolverine, and I'd always like rage out on everybody, and I would usually end up beating everybody. So that was a great game, dude.
Dude, it was a great game. And when they finally brought it back, not too long ago, it was like good to see it come back, because you know what? As much as the trash of the industry has become, like, you still got the core books are just fucking,
Yeah, man. I mean, it's, the canon is beautiful. They're just not doing much with these books these days. So it's kind of like, and what they are doing isn't what the audience wants. So that's kind of where the disinterest comes in. But everybody at that comic store was very welcoming, but everybody just had very strong opinions, and that's also what made it fun. But so when these guys looked at my work, I knew that either they were going to tear it apart or it was going to be positive. There wasn't really going to be any gray area, because and they'd be nice about it. They wouldn't be jerks but they would just say what they liked about it, what they didn't. But everybody was like, "Wow, this looks really good," and everybody agreed. They're like, "Your pencils are okay. Your pencils are okay. Your inking really sucks." And inking, because inking is really hard. I mean, it's very difficult work. You want to talk about technique, man. My friend Mark Morales, who's probably the best inker in the industry, is just a master and only gets better as he gets older. That's something I could never really quite dial in, but everybody said your coloring looks great. So that's when I went out and I invested in a bunch of Pantone and designed 2 markers, and started doing more coloring on marker paper. And that's about the same time I met Brian Polito, and I started doing some samples for him because Chaos at the time was riding high, and they were outselling Marvel at the time.
Nice.
But really, I went to the Art Institute of Phoenix after Chaos, and I got my bachelor's in animation, and that's where I really learned Photoshop and After Effects and Avid and 3D Studio Max at the time was one of the programs that was hot. So that was my experience in schooling. We went year round, so it was about 2 years I was there and got my bachelor's. And I was having a drink with a friend of mine after we had graduated, and he said hi-fi design is hiring. And I said, "Who's hi-fi design?" And because at the time I wasn't really reading a whole lot of comics. I kind of dropped out to a degree. And he said, "They're a color house," and he said, "They're out on the west side." And I just said, "Oh, okay." I said, "How many people do they have?" This is like 4 or 5, and they want to add someone else. And so anyway, I went home that night, and I was driving home, and I thought to myself, I've already got a portfolio. I mean, I've already got published work. I should go out there and go talk to them. And I thought to myself, I was like, I'm going to beat this guy to it, which is what I did. Like on Monday, I called, and I was like, because I knew my friend Philip he was kind of lazy, and I figured he'd probably do it maybe, at some point in time during the week. But I was just kind of like, hey, I'm going to be early bird that catches the worm, and why should he work there when I already have experience? And if he's not smart enough to get up Monday morning and call over there and say, "Hey, I'd like to come down and meet you. I've already got published work. I got a bachelor's degree. I'm a blank slate. You can teach me your method, which was very appealing about me at the time. And also it showed initiative. And went down and met Brian Miller, had a really nice conversation. They sent me home with a sample page to do on a zip drive. Most people, there's probably people in this audience that have never heard of that before. Could hold 100 megs. It was a big deal.
Right.
And so I did a sample page. I did a sample page for Hi-Fi. I went back the next day. I didn't email it to them. I drove back out there, and we opened up the PSD, and they said, yeah, this is good. This is solid. And, you're gonna, we're basically going to teach you our method. We're going to break you down and build you back up, as Jason Keith said. And that's exactly what they did. So between Jason and Val Staples and Brian Buccellato, those three guys really helped me, start out again in the industry. Because this was different. With Chaos, it was a different game. It was it was also creator-owned stuff. It was horror, sci-fi, fantasy, and now here I am working in the major leagues on New X-Men, and Birds of Prey, with Amanda Connor. So it was, it was kind of trial by fire. I got dropped right into the middle of it, and fortunately, I had really good support with Brian and Val and Jason and everybody, and Brian Miller, and it took me about a year, I think, really before I became comfortable, and I was producing 2 pages a day, and doing decent. I would call now decent work, because I really was very much starting over again.
Well, yeah, and you allowed the company to actually dial you in their style and everything.
Yeah, because we had a palette. That was the cool thing, and that's also what made it easy, was they had like a palette that you could sample from, and they had a similar. Everybody was kind of doing sort of a similar style, so the book would look cohesive. So even though you had maybe 2 guys on a book, you can't tell one page from the other as far as style. It's all very seamless and cohesive. So, and that's usually what they do. What ended up happening was I ended up being paired up with Brian Buccellato, and he and I worked with tackle books together. And then Jason and Val, and there's another guy, Steve Cobb, who's a great artist and a great colorist. He was there too. But yeah, it was fun, man. We were all working in this office in this town called Sun City, on the west side of Phoenix, which is a gigantic retirement community. So so there's like all these people, basically you can't live there if you are 65 and under. It's age restricted. So there's just like blue hairs and old people like driving scooters and golf carts and like tricycles. And we were like the youngest people under like 65. And because Brian Miller and Christy lived in Surprise, which was like 10, 15 minutes even east of there, which was like kind of like this brand new housing development and stuff. So Brian was able to find like cheap office space in Sun City, but it was so bizarre, just being surrounded by all these old people all day long. Like it was really weird.
Yeah. And you're in that local small community where it's like, ambulances are going off all over the place.
Yeah. It's like we go to the bank. We go to the bank to like deposit our checks, and it was just everybody's there like cashing their Social Security or something, or depositing it, and here we are. We look like we all look like we're 12 basically in comparison. It was really funny. So
and you're they're all the pop in place was the Rite Aid or the CVS.
Yeah, no, actually, there was a Greek place we would go to, which was always really busy. They actually made really good heroes. But Sun City it was built back in the 60s, so it's all mid-century modern and very kind of Mad Men sort of looking, and it looks exactly the same. I know a lot of people who are into mid-century modern art furniture and stuff, and go out there to garage sales and stuff because it's just like a time capsule out there, man. It's crazy.
It's like preserved 1950s.
Yeah, it's hot in Phoenix. So everybody just lives, all those people out there just live in like, it's like what was it, Henry Miller, The Great Air Conditioning Nightmare or whatever. That's sort of what it is. Everybody just lives inside like their they're climate controlled little homes, and rarely, they go out maybe to go grocery shopping or something. So it's really bizarre though. So
yeah, and that's like I grew up, going around my grandparents, and they lived in a retirement village later in life and stuff in Southern California, and so that was one of those things where it's a gated community and all that jazz, and it's like, it's pretty nice, but it was just funny to be like,
yeah,
kid there, and me and my brother, we got into so much shit because of the fact that we were the only young ones in the area.
Yeah, exactly. You're just bound to just be troublemakers because you're full of energy and you're young. So it was fun though. I worked there I worked at Hi-Fi, I think, for 2.5, maybe 3 years before then I moved to Chicago to work for Devil's Due, coloring G.I. Joe and Voltron
that's cool. Fun. Like the toss back, like 80s.
Yeah, Josh Blaylock keyed in on that really early on in the early 2000s. He somehow, I don't know how, but he saw that trend coming back. All of those 80s properties and licenses being relaunched, like Battle of the Planets and Robotech and Star Blazers and all that stuff. I mean, even G.I. Joe, Thundercats was launched back then.
You brought it up, so I'm gonna ask, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but
that's fine.
You've seen the recent Thundercats stuff?
Yeah. I've been pretty vocal on Twitter about it. I mean, it's obviously just horrific looking artwork. I obviously I can't say anything necessarily really about the show because we haven't seen one. But as far as I'm concerned, animation, like comic books and movies and TV, is a visual aesthetic. So you've got to have compelling images in order to tell a compelling story, because if the images don't support the world that you're trying to create, then there's no suspension of disbelief, and it can't function. People are going to be, it's not going to look authentic, and people are very intuitive and very smart. The consumer is sophisticated, and they're going to smell it, the inauthenticity. So I just look at that stuff and I just think it's a really piss poor, ugly style. Right off the bat, I don't really like anything about it. Even the little weird squiggly highlights that they put on Lino and the other characters. The style itself is just aesthetically, it's just like nails on a chalkboard. It's just horrible from top to bottom. And then to come at it from this goofy humor, it's a comedy. I just don't understand it. They deconstructed it, and that's fine. But like what they created is just it's just kind of an abomination visually. So it's not going to sell, And then on top of that, it's such a radical change from the direction of the original or the 90s.
Or even 2011, which no one got on because the 80s revamp really wasn't popular. But the 2011 styling was fucking amazing for a revamp. You still look like cats. They still look like freaking, these badasses. And now they look like fucking trolley fat asses, running around.
Yeah, it's just a really peculiar style. And frankly, what they did, if you look at all the other incarnation of Thundercats, the style is very strong and robust and heroic. And these are obviously warriors. These are obviously masculine, tough, dynamic characters. So just visually, that's what they portray. Strength, masculinity, heroic. It's interesting, when you get into the psychology of design, and especially anime, which has an already very dynamic and kind of interesting look to it already. And somebody brought up the fact that they don't consider Thundercats manga today, even though these were all Japanese studios that were hired to produce all these shows: Silverhawks, Thundercats, Galaxy Rangers, Jason the Wheel Warriors, even in Humanoids, Centurion. These are all Japanese studios that are using their style, call it manga, call it anime, whatever. You know, if you want to get into a semantic argument over like if a plain over like is a plain omelet an omelet, you know, whatever. Yeah. It's a Japanese style, it's a Japanese look, which was different from the cartoons that America was producing, and I saw that instantly when I started watching G-Force and Star Blazers, and then obviously in 84, 85 when Robotech rolled around, that was even more different because it looked kind of like G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe's a more modern Japanese studio. Robotech is mid to late 70s, so it's kind of it looked a little bit older, but at the same time the stories were far more compelling, and you know they're killing off major characters, which didn't happen in American right. You know, stuff. So that was always a big thing. But really, the whole look of the style of those cartoons back then, even G.I. Joe, everybody's just like, you know, all the male guys are just square jawed and buff and look like they're ready to spring into action at any moment. And it's the same with Silverhawks and Thundercats. So there is obviously a reason why they did that, to portray heroism and to portray these characters as being, you know, action oriented, and they do battle and they're warriors. And when I look at this new incarnation, I'm just like, that doesn't portray any of that whatsoever. That you've just sort of emasculated the characters and dumbed them down to these little squishy, you know, goofy gummy bear looking fucking, you know, characters that, you know, don't have the qualities which made those characters unique and interesting and compelling. Chitara is probably one of the best examples. You know, she's such an athlete in a sense, and such a badass, and so fast, and you know, and that's kind of that's built into the design, the concept design of her character. You know, lean and fast and super dynamic, and you know, and it's like I look at that one now with the unibrow, and I'm just like, what the fuck the hell is that? You know what I mean? You know, it's so abrasive, basically, and basically they just did a 180. I mean, I will give them credit for one thing: they have balls. What they're doing.
Oh, okay? Massive, because they're going to piss off so many people.
They already have. Yeah, they already have. You know, and frankly, somebody made the argument on Facebook the other day and then deleted it. But I'll make the but it's this argument that you know, it's sad to see a bunch of middle-aged men you know, upset about this when they shouldn't be, because this cartoon is not meant for them. And you know, I disagree with the premise completely. I'm not looking to watch Thundercats, okay? I had my time with Thundercats when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, and I don't need to go back. You know, I might rewatch an episode just for fun, but I'm not interested in tuning in. You know, there's other shows that I watch now that are a little more sophisticated. But if you want to watch Thundercats, that's great. But like, seriously, man, it's like, it's not about that. It's about the fact that all of us middle-aged guys, you know, a lot of us have kids. I don't, but a lot of us do. And we care about what they consume and what they watch. And frankly, you know, I would rather my kids watch the old Thundercats because they're better role models. It was a more wholesome show. And I like the fact that they're warriors and that they're buff and heroic and awesome looking and ready, you know, and look like they're about to jump out of the screen. That's, you know, that's the version that shaped me. I turned out great. And I don't want this cartoony, stupid version. You know, it just doesn't appeal to me. And frankly, I wouldn't want my kids consuming it because, you know, frankly, there's better lessons to be learned from that original show. That original show was great. You know, it was like G.I. Joe and all those shows. They all kind of had like a theme and a lesson. you know, which was all basic, and it wasn't political. It was all just basically kind of wholesome, you know, Western philosophy and Western culture being pushed, you know, through a cartoon, and which ultimately was trying to drive toy sales.
Yeah, exactly. That's all it was. But
yes.
it was still well done, even though the pivot was push sales and push, you know, these toys.
Yeah, you know, that's kind of the funny thing about what all of those shows created. They all had, whether they intended to or not, you know, the ultimate goal all obviously was to sell toys and push people into the toy store. But the funny thing that ended up happening was all of those shows influenced and had a real effect on all of us. And from He-Man to Thundercats to all of those shows, some of them which only ran one season, you know, because the toys didn't sell. But for the ones that lasted 3, 4, 5 seasons, Galaxy Rangers is one which was fantastic. Bionic 6, that was a great show. They all just had really good, wholesome messages for kids, and great, and those characters in those shows portrayed great leadership qualities, because, you know, the hero is the archetype. That's who, you know, everybody wanted to be Lion-O, or the girls wanted to be Cheetara. You know, she's a hero. She's a positive role model. So, you know, I know it's all about pushing toys, but those guys actually ended up doing, I think, a whole lot of good. They created a lot of really great, wholesome pop culture. And that era of pop culture probably is some of the strongest we've seen in the last 40, you know, 30 or 40 years. It is still that 80s and early to mid 90s. It started to kind of break down towards the late 90s, but there's still some good stuff in there.
Yeah, and you have, well, I mean, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and like you have like the Ninja Turtles, and I will give, I mean, it's not cartoon, but like even Power Rangers, man, as cheesy as that shit is now, looking back, it made me want to do martial arts as a kid.
It was fun.
Yeah,
it was fun. I liked, you know, I didn't watch Power Rangers much, but I always respected it because I thought it was fun how they had to re-edit all that stuff. And I thought they did a really interesting and creative job with it, editing it and making it seamless and cohesive. And I just love that whole, I love all that Japanese pop culture and the way they make their movies, and how, and I think a lot of it is just, I grew up consuming a lot of that early, late 70s, early 80s anime, like Star Blazers and Battle of the Planets and all this stuff. So you get hooked on it, and that's all portrayed in their live action. You know, the live action kind of emulates the anime and the animation more than it does emulate other live action in a lot of ways. The camera movements and the fighting and stuff. So to me, Power Rangers was kind of like watching, you know, kung fu in a lot of ways, as well as sort of anime, all wrapped into sort of this weird live action. And, you know, the robots and everything, they're all really cool designs. I mean, the Japanese designed some of the greatest, you know, mech and robots and stuff. I mean, they just own that stuff. So.
Yeah. And just the styling.
Yeah. It was a great era. And I think what's great about Amazon Prime and all this stuff is that you can go watch all this stuff. They have all the seasons of Galaxy Rangers. They have Thundercats. They have Silverhawks. So you don't have to watch this new Thundercats. I mean, it's good that people are pissing and moaning about it, but, you know, at least we can go back and you know, if you don't want your kids to watch it, you can watch the original series, which you know, or any one of those series back then. It's just such better storytelling, and you don't have to worry about weird, liberal tropes or SJW, having an SJW
political garbage.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw that unibrow, I saw what they did with the Cheetara with the unibrow, and just basically they took all of the femininity. Like you can't. It's hard to tell between the characters who's male and who's female, because they're all just sort of these amorphous, sort of blobby, they're almost like unfinished drawings in a way. It's like, it's kind of like, you do sort of roughs, with, when you're starting to sketch, and it's almost kind of like those characters are not fully developed or finished. They looked very unfinished to me because they're so cartoony and so basic. I mean, the Flintstones are more interesting looking than those characters, and the Flintstones are really basic character, basic kind of shapes that similar to the Simpsons. I just don't understand whatsoever who the hell thought that was a good idea. And then I look at that lead animator guy with that fucking top. That's not even like a man bun. Like, what in God's name is going on with that man? Who in his life told him that is a good haircut? and why didn't someone pull him inside and say, dude, you're going to be on TV. This is going to be all over the internet. Don't do the I mean, I don't even know what do you call that? Like a top ponytail? What the fuck is that?
Was he trying to pull the Japanese top knot?
Yeah, I think that's what it was. I think he's trying to do a top knot. So it's all shaved on the side, right? It's like tight on the side, which is sort of like what we did in the 90s. Yeah. You grew your hair really long down to like your shoulders, but you shaved it underneath.
Yeah.
Like Jason Newsted or like Kurt Cobain did. Yeah. So he's kind of got that, but it's so short that it wouldn't fall really. I don't even think it falls over his ears. So I'm like, is that what he is? Is that like the style? Just high and tight around the sides, and then he's just got this stupid ponytail like that sticks like an inch above his head, cropped, at the top. I saw girls in the 80s that would do like the side crop. They put the ponytail on the side.
Yeah. The Napoleon Dynamite.
Exactly. Yeah. Deb. They do the Deb.
Yeah, exactly.
And you do one side or the other, right? And that was cool. But like, I just looked at this guy and I was like, okay, if this dude thinks that this is acceptable in real life and he's going to go on TV, it speaks a lot about the fact that he thought that these were the best foot forward with as far as a design and an approach and a vision for relaunching Thundercats. It's like, once I saw what a slovenly slob this guy looks like in this horrible haircut, I was just like, okay, I get it. This guy doesn't even care about what he looks like on camera, let alone what the fuck his characters look like going into the relaunching Thundercats. Seriously, man, put on a jacket. You know what I mean? Seriously.
Oh, okay. So it's not even like, it's not like he's shaved on the side or anything either. I just pulled it up. Like, I'm gonna screen share this.
I have no problem with the beard. I have a problem.
What? Like, seriously, like, check this out, guys.
What in God's name is going on here? Victor Courtright.
Do not. I mean, if you want to tweet at him, do it, but do it somewhat nice. Just tell him his art, and he shouldn't be a producer for anything because it's a fucking trash model.
Let's get a haircut.
And get a haircut.
Get a haircut.
Like, honestly, the reason he's doing that, so it distracts when he makes his soy boy faces.
Yes. God, so much soy, so little time.
Like, honestly, man, it's one of those things where they're pushing that, like, mindset of, you have to, I mean, look, it's Teen Titans Go.
Mm-hmm.
And someone actually found a mirror of the two comics, or the pictures sitting side by side, and it's a mirror of another cartoon that they do on Cartoon Network.
Really?
Like, it was side by side. I wish I could fucking find it. It was on Twitter.
Yeah, I know why. From a practical standpoint, I understand why they go with a very simple, basic style, because
you can copy and paste everything.
Yeah, or you can move those shapes around, and I don't know what they're using, like After Effects. I have no idea. But to do the type of work of an 80s Thundercats or a 90s Thundercats, or even the 2011 stuff, you've got to have really good artists. You got to have great animators. People who can do that style, and that takes technique and talent. And something tells me that you can get away with doing that more cartoony thing with people who don't, you're not going to require that high caliber of talent. And I think that that's sort of what's going on in entertainment as a whole, sort of the soft bigotry of low expectations. All of us have these, kind of low expectations because we get all of this crap, and then it just becomes sort of the norm. It's one of the reasons why I think the response to Jawbreakers has been so big, is because we're offering something that's new, but also something that looks great. And people say that's a throwback. They're like, it's a 90s style. I'm like, okay, so quality was only known in the 90s? It's like, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't have a look or a style. It's just quality, man. And really, all we're trying to do is kind of emulate cinema. I'm trying to, with my coloring, I try and emulate movies. And John largely does the same thing, because we both understand that ultimately, if you're going to be competitive in the comic book industry these days, you have to be competing with video games and movies and TV. That's really ultimately is our biggest, competitor. And so movies and TV are competing with live action. Video games basically now look like live action. So comics need to step up their game and stop looking like, half-assed Vertigo titles, and start looking like, having the same type of quality and care and love that the guys that Image, showed back in the 90s, or even in the 80s. I know the coloring wasn't quite what it is today, and you couldn't do that type of thing. But, prior to Photoshop being able to, take somebody's art that wasn't very interesting and make it look really great, that's part of the dumbing down. You couldn't get away with that. So the artwork was stronger in the 80s because the coloring didn't have all the capability it has today. So there was more impetus and reliance on the artists to turn in really great, compelling visuals. So now, they're relying more on colorists to fix things, or to prop things up, or enhance things. And what's great is that, with guys like John, I don't have to do any of that stuff. It's just mainly, I just go in there and I'm not fixing anything, because there's nothing to be fixed. So
you're getting to do your job, which
exactly
is to make it, pop and add the color and the stylization, instead of having to be like, well, this is all shit, I need to work on this. Someone in the chat was asking, Days Volt, who's your favorite Batman actor from any movie or cartoon?
Okay. I waited in line for Batman the movie on opening day in 1988. And it was June or July in Phoenix. So it was triple digits. So, Keaton will always be really special. The same way that kind of Chris Reeve is sort of like my childhood, Superman. Yeah. Keaton's really my childhood Batman. And especially that first one is still just such a great film. And he gives an amazing performance, because I was a big Mr. Mom fan. I love that movie. So when I learned that Mr. Mom was going to be Batman, I was kind of like, huh? I read that. I remember reading that in Starlog at the time when they finally announced all the casting. And then I think it was later on that they announced Jack. That wasn't, I don't think that was locked down like right, in the beginning. So, so Keaton, but honestly, man, I'm a big Nolan fan. I really love, Bale. I just think that, Christian is such an amazing actor. My first impression with him is Empire of the Sun, and he's older than me, but he's kind of, I forget how old is he. I think he's 50. He's kind of like my big brother's age. He's got like 8 or 10 years on me, but maybe, I don't know. But I remember watching Empire of the Sun and just being like, I really like this. I like this kid. I like this, as far as like this actor. He's got chops. I remember thinking that, he's kind of like the E.T. kid. He's got chops. You can believe him when he's sitting there acting. So I thought it was a great choice, and I really liked what Nolan did with that universe. I thought that was so much fun, kind of bringing it down to earth in a lot of ways. And I know it's kind of, not something you often hear, but my favorite of the three is the first one. I think Batman Begins is just pretty much a perfect film in a lot of ways. It's very similar to Superman the movie, and Nolan has said that he used kind of Superman the movie, Donner's 78 version, as sort of a template for Batman Begins in a lot of ways, casting and structure and, you know, playing it off as real. So I really liked Bale. I thought he did a great job. You know, I mean, you can, you know, some people argue over sort of the style that Nolan took and whatnot, but I thought it was a lot of fun.
Dude, my favorite was Val Kilmer.
You know, Val did a good job. I mean, you know, one of the things that people forget is that, and even with Justice League,
it was the damn nipples, man.
And well, just remember something. You know, these guys, they show up to work and they really do their best. And you know, when things like the script or the costumes or the decisions the director make, that's not on them. So it's like, I don't hold Henry responsible for the shit show that went on with Batman versus Superman, nor do I hold Ben responsible, nor do I hold Gal or anybody responsible for Justice League, which was also, in my opinion, a shit show. They all showed up and did their job, and they really did more with less because they didn't have a whole lot to work with. I mean, you know, so they're going in hamstrung, but they all go in and they do their best. And Henry's such a great actor. You know, it's kind of like, let him act. That guy has some serious fucking chops, the same as Christian Bale. I mean, he's so much, you know, just like Keaton, he is so much more than just Batman. I mean, he's a much larger actor that can do all kinds of stuff. But at the same time, it's like, you know, when you're Batman, you're Batman. Keaton did some kind of address at a college recently. And he's like, I'm going to leave you with 2 words. He's like, right at the end of his speech. He's like, so, and he's like, never forget it. He's like, I'm Batman. You know, and everybody just went crazy. You know, so it's like, you know, I mean, you know, it's great that he's embraced it because I kind of got the feeling for a while that maybe he sort of resented it. Maybe it was, you know, because it ties you up. You're typecast, especially nowadays with these contracts. You sign on to be Superman or Batman. That
3 to 5 movies.
Yeah, that could mean 7 to 10 years of your life.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and you look at like the MCU and stuff, and Robert Downey Jr. being a great example. Yeah. Like how long he's been playing that character for over 10 years.
Yeah, you know, it's so hard to imagine someone else doing it at this point. And I think even Robert would agree that it's kind of like Hugh. You know, how does Hugh step away from Wolverine at this point? It's going to be really hard. Those are big shoes to fill, and both those guys, you know, Hugh's an amazing actor. Hugh's got a lot of range. He can do a lot of different stuff. So
I think they did the justice with using the Logan story to finalize the character and let him move on in life. Otaku was asking, what do you think of the Killing Joke animated movie?
I haven't seen it. It's funny. The Killing Joke, you know, will always it'll be special to me in 2 ways. You know, I bought it new, and I enjoyed it. You know, it was very risque at the time.
Yeah.
You know, I was pretty young, but at the same time, you know. My dad, you know, we would talk about these things. You know, this is make believe. This isn't real, obviously. You know, so I always understood these things. They're stories. So I like it. You know, I'm not a huge Alan Moore fan. I think that Alan Moore is largely really overrated, and I've never really quite understood the whole fascination with him. You know, he's definitely, you know, has had his moments, Watchmen being one of them. That's a good book. It doesn't have, but my biggest thing about Killing Joke is it just doesn't have enough Batman. There's just not enough Batman. It's a lot like Batman Returns, the movie. There's, you know, I wanted more Batman. There was just way too much, you know, Danny DeVito and way too much Michelle Pfeiffer and Christopher Walken and Billy D. Williams. And it's just like, where the fuck is Batman? Where's Michael Keaton? You know, because that's really what I showed up for. You know, so anyway, what the hell was I talking about? I just completely lost my train of thought.
You're talking about how in Killing Joke, the
Oh yeah,
animated or the book. There's not enough Batman.
There's not enough Batman. I have not seen. I've seen the trailer. It looked good. It looked like good quality animation. And then the other thing about The Killing Joke is The Killing Joke was #1 at the time on the New York Times bestseller list when Clinton Cash came out, and it had sat there for 2 years at the #1 spot. And when Clinton Cash debuted, we sold out in a day. We moved close to 10,000 copies in a day, and we knocked The Killing Joke out of the #1 spot, where it had sat for, like I said, for 2 years. And Clinton Cash was #1 on New York Times for 2 weeks, and then it dropped to #2 for the remainder of the month. And then I think it was like in the top 10 for in and around where right after the election, and then it obviously dropped off. But it's interesting. That book continues to sell, and I kind of track it on Amazon, and it's interesting that it's become a perennial seller, largely based on the fact that I think that it's just such good quality, and you've got great names attached to it, like Chuck Dixon and Graham Nolan and Sergio Cariello and Paul Ravoche and Don Hudson. So, but yeah, I took a lot of pride in that, knocking Killing Joke out of the #1 spot, especially considering it had been there for 2 years. I mean that's especially and it was such an unconventional book, a political book, obviously, which is filled with tons of satire and humor and mockery and parody. It's a funny book, so it was a very unconventional book to debut and that high and have that kind of success, and also move a big legacy character like Batman out of the #1 spot. But the timing was right, because we published in October, so obviously everybody was lasered in on November and the election. So and obviously Peter's original book and Clinton Cash was topic of conversation, so the timing was quite perfect.
Right. Another question from the audience: what inspiration or influences do you use for your color scheme in Lost Souls? Obviously, Jawbreakers. Pages so far are brilliant.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. All the fans' support, has been great, and I like to think that I've helped bring the position of the colorist to the forefront. It's such an important position, and it's often overlooked. And I really appreciate everyone out there with all their kind words and their support, and tagging me and everything, and including me, because a lot of times colorists get left out. So it's been I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. My influences, I didn't really set out with any kind of influence. I wanted to. Richard and I originally talked about it having a '90s feel. However, I wanted it to be contemporary. I didn't want it to look dated. I wanted it to look modern. So really what I kind of went for was sort of like, okay, because I don't really pull necessarily from other colorists. I like other colorists like Justin Ponser and Laura Martin and Peter Steigerwald, and some of these people are my friends, and they've been influences on me over the years. But really, I was trying to pull from film, and I just thought to myself, this needs to look as cinematic as possible. And if I could pick a director, and a cinematographer for Jawbreakers, who would it be? And I thought Tony Scott, or Michael Bay, and I would get or John McTiernan, and then I get probably like Jan de Bont or somebody to shoot it. So Jan de Bont, shot Die Hard and a lot of the 80s films, and he like Ridley and Tony and other guys came from advertising. So and I have a background in advertising as well, doing storyboards. So it's like my career is not just comics; it's also been in advertising and selling things and working on working on TV commercials and whatnot for Miller Beer and Chase Bank and Coors and Fruit by the Foot and all kinds of weird shit. So it's a very visual. It's a very, very visual medium. I mean, you are the hook. The visuals are the hook. You have to grab the audience, because and you've only got 30 seconds. You got a minute at best Commercials used to be so much longer, but they've just been compressed and they're so expensive. But so you have a very limited amount of time to grab somebody's attention and retain it and sell your product. And most of the times these days, I don't necessarily really remember the product. I remember the ad, that's bad advertising. You want to remember the product, not the ad. But
I don't know, man, because you have some of those iconics like the Noid and stuff from like the late 80s, early 90s. I remember the Noid, and I can tell you it was Domino's Pizza. You know why? Because they don't do it anymore. Me and my mod Deus Volt were talking about this. He's a good friend of mine. They don't create a character for you to latch on to in advertising anymore.
And the only ones that are left are basically your sort of legacy. You've got Jolly Green Giant, you've got Pillsbury Doughboy, you've got Cheerios B. A lot of them are wrapped up in cereal at this point.
The last one that did it well was Burger King with the King.
The King. Oh God, the King is just. I mean, that is just that is so genius. I love the King. And Jack in the Box, obviously, they had a really good one. I don't know what house they were using, but for a while, their ads were just genius. And now it's kind of old shtick. I'm not exactly sure. They're not keeping it quite fresh enough. Jack's funny, but he's not quite as funny as he used to be. But yeah, the King was so spooky. He was so creepy and weird. And
and that face.
That face. I mean, that was kind of the whole thing. I remember years ago at the Kentucky Derby. God, what was the name of the horse? Gosh, but the owners of this horse that won, the horse won the Triple Crown, and the owners who are from Arizona had the King with them in their skybox, and it was so I could never figure out what that was all about, but like it was just so bizarre seeing the King hanging out in the skybox like at the Kentucky Derby. With the owners of this horse that had won. It's so bizarre. But like, yeah, the King is fantastic, man. So, but you don't get a lot of that stuff. The Noid was genius because the Noid reminds you of Domino's. So, I mean, in that sense, that's a good ad. That's a good character. That was an effective ad campaign because you associate that pizza and that brand with the Noid. It's like the Energizer Bunny. Again, that's kind of a timeless ad campaign. It's sort of like, your dietary ad campaigns will never change. They're going to be before and after photos forever.
Yeah.
And they always have been.
Because they're pushing that narrative of you used to be this and now you're this.
You can be. That's right. Yeah. You can be. You have the potential.
This is it's a lot of marketing and, advert 101. But the thing that we were talking about before we jumped in is like modern guerrilla marketing, which you're seeing with what you guys are doing. You guys are really using the Streisand effect to a massive extreme because you have these jackasses out in the industry saying how horrible you guys are when one, they haven't even seen the book. There's no politicalness to the book. I mean, unless fighting a gorilla, they're going to find some sort of reference there.
I would suppose in a cultural way, it is political to them because we have masculine characters, tough guys, doing heroic, dangerous, outrageous things. So, and we have traditional roles. We have men and women. And there's no in between. From what I understand, one of the Jawbreakers is gay. I don't know which one it is. I have no idea. And I honestly, I don't really care.
It doesn't matter.
I don't really care. I mean, I think it's kind of funny that like that's true, but at the same time, I'm just so much more interested in the story, frankly, than I am in those kinds of details. And frankly, story comes first with Jawbreakers. Man,
so you've read the story.
Yeah.
You have 100. It's the reason I ask is because of with the stretch goals and everything and the push of it being a bigger book. Is the story completed?
I have a portion of the script, so I'm actually not sure.
Okay.
You know, it's something I've actually got to ask Richard, because we've got a couple different publishers that are interested in this book, and I've got to show them a script. So yes, but I think the script is complete. I think John told me that. I think Richard's just doing some polishing and a little tweaks here and there. But yeah,
awesome.
man, it's the response to it, is partially, it's kind of twofold. It's the outrage and the gatekeepers and all the bad actors in comics and all the dysfunction and the sort of the drama, all this toxic drama, and then also you've just got the reaction to the characters and the work and what we are offering people, which is action packed, adrenaline, high adventure, just pure escapist entertainment that you used to get from Hollywood, used to get from comics. I guess you could call that a throwback, but I don't think it's a throwback at all. I think it is what it is. There's nothing there, you don't have to go back to tell a great story. You just have to tell a great story with fun and interesting characters and take people on, a rip roaring adventure. This story is a big romp. It's fun. It's over the top. That's what people want. They don't want to get down into the weeds of, misappropriating genders. They're not interested in that.
Or diving into the garbage of, oh, now this person just, 180s and they're bisexual, gay, whatever.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, frankly, why? They get that everywhere else. They get that in movies. They get that in TV. They get that in news and politics. It's in their feed. It's everywhere. They're bombarded with it. And frankly, we're offering people an escape from all of that nonsense. And it's, I think people are really hungry for that kind of content and that kind of just pure escapist, adventure story. So Jawbreakers has, I think enough kind of nostalgia of what great heroes were and used to be, and how they used to be portrayed, even down to how they look. We're talking about Thundercats and how the original design, they were obvious. I mean, you just looked at them. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, they're heroic. You look at that first page of Jawbreakers and you're kind of like, wow, these are dynamic, heroic guys, obviously on the run. It's got a little bit of flavor of G.I. Joe, a little bit of A-Team. Even kind of like, Merc movies like Dogs of War with Christopher Walken and Tom Berenger, which is a really great underrated 80s movie about mercenaries. It's just, this is just going to be such a fun story, and people get that just with the visuals, without any lettering. And I think that, again, there's a huge underserved audience out there. The Jawbreakers fans, the Jawbreakers Army, Richard's community is a portion of that audience. The audience that was interested in Thump is a part of that audience. The audience that bought My Hero Macadamia, that's a part of this audience. So we've identified a very large audience, even outside of the people that have backed Jawbreakers. And that's really exciting, because that means that there's enough potential there. There's enough demand to create more stuff. And that's what all of us, Tim Lynn and Chuck Dixon and Mike Barron and the Brightweisters, all of us are forging ahead with. We're going to be creating more content for all of you out there, because there's obviously a big audience out there, and you guys have money you're willing to spend and invest in us. And in a way, we're going to invest in you and give you great content and great entertainment that you're not getting elsewhere. And that's a great thing, man. I mean, we have, we're really on the ascendancy here. The rules for how comics are being written, or the rules for how comics are being made, are being rewritten, like almost every day.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, you look at the huge shift that you to do something like this, 5-10 years ago, you would need a lot of support, a lot of backing in the sense of studios and other things, and, publishing and precursory work. But now you can take what, pretty much three guys, the one who wrote the story, the one who does the line work and art, and then the colorist, and put together an amazing piece of work because the fans want it. And your precursory, what are you at now? 9,000? Almost 9,000?
We're getting there. You know, once we reach about, once we reach about it was 8,800. We're going to be about 10% of Richard's audience that we know of. You know, if you take his Twitter and his YouTube and you combine them, you got about roughly 90,000 people there. So
minus overlap and other stuff.
Right. So I mean, we're within that 10%, which I think is fantastic. I mean, that's very healthy starting out, and that's where I always wanted to get. I always wanted to see this get was somewhere between 5 and 10% of his core audience that you can identify, by way of just people who are signed up. And I know there's probably like maybe a 4%, maybe somewhere between a 2 and 4% margin of error, maybe in some of those numbers. But either way, having 8,000 people buy your book that's not even out yet, that's a very strong start. Thump is approaching 10,000 copies sold. Clinton Cash is somewhere around 30. My Hero Academia is sold out again. I don't even know. I hope it's going to be available again, but that's like going to go into its 5th printing. So I'm not exactly sure how many that's sold, but it's probably in the thousands. So obviously, you create great content for people with all of these things, like Jawbreakers, like some of these other books I've mentioned, and it's kind of like you build it and they will come.
Yeah, exactly. And do you think, and the reason I'm asking this is because I think it might be time to play it close to the chest, and then once everything is done out of the way with Splatto, and finding someone who's going to print and publish the book in that regard. Do you think it's smart that now with what you've seen happen, playing it close to the chest, so the shitty, people who want to see this thing destroyed don't have a chance? Or do you think it's smart to let it play out and let them build even more hype for you via the Streisand effect?
There was never any chance that this thing was not going to get published. So I had, we had Antarctic, and if you want to give me a nickname, you can call me Hannibal, because I had a plan B, and I had a plan C, and I have a plan D. And I knew that with a hot, from my experience with Clinton Cash, having a real hot potato with that book, we lost our initial publisher with Clinton Cash because the publisher got cold feet because once Hillary won the nomination and stole it from Bernie, they were kind of like, we don't know if we want to be a part of this. And this is one of the biggest publishers in the world. This is Hachette I'm talking about. So Hachette bowed out, and then we had probably about 48 hours where we didn't have a publisher, but we had 3 or 4 really good offers, and ended up going with Regnery, which is obviously a conservative publisher and goes back to the 40s with like William F. Buckley. So I mean that worked out nicely, and some people have thought that this book is that Jawbreakers is going to be published for the Regnery. There's no way that's not going to happen. Some people have said they're trying to deduce or do kind of deductive reasoning into figuring out what publisher I'm talking to, but I'm talking to multiple publishers, all of whom are very interested in Jawbreakers. Some are book publishers, some are comic book publishers. And I don't know what deal we're going to take. We might just bypass the comic book industry completely and, publish through a book publishing company. And, we still have all the same advantages. It'll be on Amazon. It'll be, you can order it direct through the publisher, or you can order it through your local comic shop. And our distributor will work with Diamond. So, and that's, you know, and that's with all of the options that I'm working, you know, on the back end of this thing and behind the scenes. So I just laugh at people who say that it's canceled, or, oh, they're never going to get it published. It's just like, are you fucking kidding me? You think this is my first rodeo? And you think I'm going to let these people beat us? You know, right. I took on the Clintons, and you think that Mark Wade is going to scare me? You think that these, you know, I mean, frankly, when you take on the Clintons, who have a, you know, basically a trail of bodies behind them, you know, everything else after that is patty cake. So I don't fear these people. They don't intimidate me. And frankly, this is the free market. This is America. And I'll be damned if some, you know, if some has-been writer at Marvel is gonna intimidate me. I'm just gonna go and find publishers who don't give a shit what Mark Waid says, who don't give a fuck what these social justice warriors say. You know, I'm talking to publishers who are like, you know what? I hope they do call, because I'm gonna tell them to go piss up a rope. You know, I'm not. You know, we're not interested. We're not gonna be fucking intimidated. You know, this is America. You guys are not putting out a controversial book. You're putting out just a great story with great art. So, I mean, the publishers that I'm talking to are fearless, you know, and they're not going to be bullied. They're interested in turning a profit, and they want, they look at something like Jawbreakers that has all this controversy built around it, and all this political controversy, cultural controversy, even though it's just sort of this benign book. It doesn't have any of those dynamics working within it. You know, it does to a degree, because, like I said, we're telling stories about masculine, tough, heroic men, you know, and portraying them as such, you know, not like a bunch of, you know, soy boy.
You know, it's toxic.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like, you know, if you don't have your, you know, it's like I looked at that West Coast Avengers cover, and I was just kind of like, you know, it's just this emasculated soy boy, you know, romp out at the beach on a Vespa. I mean, dude, how about like a giant Harley? I mean, you couldn't find anything more effeminate to be riding around in than a Vespa. And they're all piled on one Vespa. It's like, it's just lame. You know, I mean, where's the Quinjet? Why are they on a Vespa? What's with the anarchy symbol? I mean, you know, what are you, like 12 years old? I mean, the whole thing was just this goofy parody. I mean, I thought I was looking at something from like the National Lampoon or Mad Magazine. Like this is a joke. This is funny, you know. And then it's like, no, this is real. And it's like, this is exactly what people are rejecting, man. You know. And then you look at that first page of Jawbreakers, you know, and all of them. I mean, it's just pure heroism. It's pure action packed. You know, it's full of masculinity. You know, and there's nothing toxic about it. Frankly, this country could, you know, use a big dose of androgel, if you ask me.
Yep. And that's the thing that these people want to push, and not, you know, go with this mindset of people can have different views. People can not want to have to deal with your shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
yeah. You know, fucking rocket science.
And it's cool. You know, what's great about what's going on is that Marvel believes in what they're doing. They believe in the books they're publishing, and that's great. That's wonderful. And all of us need to kind of take the attitude of there's good books at Marvel and there's bad books at Marvel, you know, and it's the same with DC and with any publisher. You know, I'm not saying that it's all bad, because Richard does reviews where he's very positive about some Marvel books. And that's one of the things I like about his reviews, is that he's honest. And if he likes a book, he'll say, this is a great book. I had a lot of fun. And he'll recommend it, and he won't tear it up or throw it across the room.
Yeah.
You know? That's what's so great about it. But I mean, honestly, man, it's kind of like all of us need to just be like, kind of like, this is a free market. You know, we now have options. We have more options coming to us with Jawbreakers and all these other projects that I've got going and other people have going. We're going to see more Kickstarters because of what Richard, you know, and John and I were able to achieve. So the future is very bright, and all of us can kind of just sort of not write Marvel off, because I'm not going to say that they're not going to turn it around or start, you know, getting competitive. But honestly, everybody needs to support these new projects and these new Kickstarters, because it's going to give everybody, another option, something else that they can buy and enjoy, just like Jawbreakers, that's done by people who are catering specifically to all of you, unlike what Marvel is doing. So it's sort of like, have a healthy attitude. Don't get wrapped up into it. Don't be pissed, because frankly, at this point, we're all working to give you people, and all the fans, the opportunity to not be pissed, to be grateful and happy that there's new stuff on the way. Help is on the way. Reinforcements are coming. You know what I mean? We just need all of you to support us like you did Jawbreakers and other things, and we'll create a universe of characters and properties and licenses that compete with Marvel and compete with DC and compete with Image. That's where I'd like to see this go. I think that we could have something really special if we marshal all of our forces, from Thump to Clinton Cash to Jawbreakers to My Hero Macadamia to the Brightwisers and Red Rooster and all of these incredibly Rags, Kelsey Shannon, all these incredibly talented people. We just need to kind of coalesce, and we have the audience. It's right there. So everything, at this point, there really is nothing beyond our reach, which is really exciting.
Yeah, and that's the thing that people have to really see, is that the more we support, and I came onto this late, in the sense of I'd never really seen it done this way. I'd buy some books occasionally, and I'd stick away from the shit like, the super political, like, oh, let me explain to you why feminism is the way of the world. But I stuck away from that, and I'm never going to buy into that shit, because we're so far past all that shit, and everyone just wants to revert. And that's why you have these big political people like Jordan Peterson and others talking about regressiveness, because we're moving fucking backwards.
Yeah, and Jordan's not ideological at all. He's just kind of a practical guy. But yeah, you're right. It is regressing.
So just in case anyone wondered, check this out. I just think it's hilarious to me. And there's quotable threads, so it is cited. There is sources for it.
That's on his Wikipedia page?
Yeah, it was editing while we were talking.
Oh God.
So now he has that edited on his Wikipedia page. So you gotta love how Wikipedia just lets you do it, especially if you can cite a source behind it. So
that's hilarious. Well, yeah, and we've had some. It's funny. Somebody made the remark, because I know within the Jawbreakers army, there's some people that are right of center. There are some people in the middle, and there's some people that are left of center. I know that there's, and that's what's so great about the Jawbreakers army, is that it includes everybody of all political spectrums. And probably some people who are apolitical, who just don't really give a shit, and that's great too. I'm an equal opportunist, so it's like, if you want great storytelling, I don't really care who you vote for or who you sleep with. I'm going to make some great content for you, which you're going to enjoy. But I think that's important, in that sense that it's not dividing anybody. And I think that's we have such a diverse background with the fans, and that's one of the things I like about Jordan, is that he really kind of talks down the ideology and just focuses on really sort of just Western philosophy, Western culture, because that's what's helped propel mankind out of the darkness. So for me, I'm not so much interested in making right-wing or left-wing comics. It's like I'm working on a graphic novel right now with Chuck Dixon, which is not political at all. It's just a great story. It's a werewolf Western with a twist. And it's more of a horror comic than it is anything. But for me, it's kind of like, I would probably say no to a project if it was tearing down Western civilization or tearing down Western philosophy or culture. That's sort of where I want to go to, is where our stories and the narratives that we have within the stories and the characters are promoting what's good and positive and awesome about Western culture and democracy and all that good stuff, you know, freedom of speech and expression. I think that's important. Ideology, you know, there's a place for that. There's a place for books like Clinton Cash. However, you know, if you really want to reach the masses, it's not that way. You know, you can't, you know, that's a hard sell, even when you go full blown comedy like we did with Clinton Cash. So I'd much rather just advance pro-Western culture through just good storytelling and good characters who embody that, you know, in a lot of ways. And I think that's achievable. And I think that's what people are responding to with Jawbreakers. I mean, Jawbreakers is,
well, there's no, it's not political. It's a freaking awesome adventure story about some, you know, washed up and older superheroes, and they became mercenaries.
Yeah.
It's not pushing any kind of agenda besides the fact that these jackasses who want to paint, you know, Richard in a certain light, which is just fucking ridiculous. Maybe do some research. Sorry he called you out for your piece of shit book and your piece of shit political push. But we have another question. What's your favorite graphic novel? Your personal favorite?
Boy, that's a tough one. Boy.
I mean, there's a lot out there.
Yeah, man, that's so tough. Gosh, it's like, you know, it's kind of like asking, like, what's your favorite movie?
Yeah, you get those ones that pop into your head, and you're just like, I guess I could say that.
Yeah, you know, I like, gosh, you know, probably when I first bought, I'm trying to think, like it's. I mean, I could say Dark Knight, but I mean, I bought all those individually, you know, when they were single issues. But you know, together it does make a graphic novel, which is pretty compelling. And it's kind of like the same with your Batman Year One. I bought all of those originally off the shelf, but you know, I really love that hardcover where it's all in graphic novel format, and all together. I don't know. I have to stew on that for a minute. That's a tough one. Just because there's been such great stuff over the years. You know, one thing that comes to mind is, well, again, those are all single issues. Secret Identity I liked a lot, and that's Busiek. And I know Busiek's been pretty abusive to the Comicsgate community, and that was really disappointing to me because I really liked Secret Identity, which was a complete and total retelling of Superman in a very realistic, down-to-earth, grounded way. And it's got beautiful artwork by Stuart Immonen, and he also does all of his own colors on it. It's you know, I mean, it's just a really interesting book visually, and it's a great story. And I've read it 2 or 3 times. So Kingdom Come, you know, I mean, we can talk about Wade. I'm a big Kingdom Come fan. I kind of loved that book when it came out, you know. Gosh, like Spider-Man Blue, God, that's a great book. Again, a lot of these aren't technically graphic novels because they were all series, and then I collected them in the trades.
Well, and then they get booked up like Marvel Civil War and other stuff. They'll book them up.
Yeah, exactly. You know, Ultimates, you know, again, you know, the trades. Just trying to think of like a single graphic novel that, you know, only came in one format that you know, that I really dug. That's a tough one. You know, IDW a couple of years ago put out the whole Collected Rocketeer in graphic novel format, and Laura Martin recolored all the Dave Stevens stuff, and God, it's just so beautiful. It's just such a gorgeous piece of work now, you know, all in one volume. That's one of my favorites. There's some amazing stuff out there. It's the ones that kind of stick out are sort of like, you know, obviously like Dark Knight and Kingdom Come. I remember there was some weird Iron Man graphic novel back in the late 90s or late 80s that I liked, and it had I'm trying to remember what it was called. It had all this weird computer generated backgrounds and artwork and stuff. Some of it was still hand drawn, but it had some weird I don't know what this guy was doing back then or what program he was using, but it was something that was really avant-garde and very strange looking. I'd have to look it up, but that was actually just a graphic novel.
Well, and see, I was going to actually ask you, and you brought it up throughout the stream, some of your influences and whatnot. I was going to say, okay, so why Die Hard at the top of the banner? But you already answered that. So,
yeah.
I was like, oh, dude, I fucking love Die Hard.
Yeah, I saw that in the theater. Man, I mean, I saw that, like, again, I remember seeing that, like, when it first came out. And, like, I don't know if it was opening night or what, but people in the theater, it was a packed theater, and people were, like, getting up and cheering, especially when he killed. When he finally, when he doesn't kill him, when he first kills Alexander Godunov's character, the guy with the long blonde hair, and that super sweet like Swedish machine gun or whatever that thing was. When he wraps the chain around him and around his neck and throws him against the wall, like people got up and were like cheering in the. It was insane. It's like 1988. But yeah, I just love that movie. I love McTiernan, Predator and Die Hard and Hunt for Red October. McTiernan is just one of the best of those guys of that era that did action, and he just really understood what people wanted. Richard was talking today about Joel Silver. He's another guy. Jerry Bruckheimer, Joel Silver, all these guys that were able to find commercial through lines to these huge audiences, and we're able to kind of capture there's something really positive about all the movies they made that was kind of sort of classic Americana. There was something, they were all proud of, everybody's proud of the country. There's just sort of a pride, and those guys were just really dialed into the culture and into the audience at that period. It's like Top Gun. I mean, Top Gun appealed to everybody. Shit. Everybody loved Top Gun, and even liberals loved Top Gun because it was so great and so fantastic and so much fun. And really, when you boil it down, Top Gun is probably one of the greatest Navy recruitment tools of all time. Because seriously, all you have to do is just look at their statistics, and their recruitment spiked like 2,000% after Top Gun came out. And it wasn't just naval aviators; it was also the SEALs, and that movie really benefited the armed forces, as a whole, because it portrayed serving your country, and less than 1% of Americans serve. So it's a very small percentage, and even less than that 1% is actual fighting force. The fighting force is like the tiniest percentage of the military. The rest is all support. So, I think that if you can do that, if you can turn basically what is essentially largely just one big advertisement for the Navy, and make it into something really commercial that all Americans can rally around, and and everybody, that movie has a real sense of pride and American pride, especially we're fighting the Russians. It's like what Stallone did in Rocky IV, using that narrative of us versus them, and also the cultures clashing and all that stuff. So it's like that stuff appeals to Americans in like kind of the purest form, because it's we're a family in that sense. We're a dysfunctional family, but at the end of the day, if you cross us, Pearl Harbor, 9/11, whatever, Boston bombers, we do come together. For the most part. There's always the fringe elements that won't, but at the end of the day, we are going to lock shields like a phalanx and kick your fucking ass.
Yeah, exactly. And you brought up McTiernan, and so or however you pronounce his name.
Yeah, McTiernan.
Last Action Hero, man. That was one of my favorite movies. And
that's Tony Scott. Yeah, that's actually Tony Scott and Shane Black. Shane Black, wrote Lethal Weapon, and
it's what's his face, who did fucking Suicide Squad, or is doing Suicide Squad. Zach Penn. Right. So that dude, I mean, that great. I love Last Boy Scout. Great movie, very funny. The villain was that comedian guy who died a couple years ago, and he called everybody by like their full name. So it's like Bruce Willis's name is Joe, and he's like, that's very hurtful, Joseph. He's like, it's like, what's his name? Damon Wayans' character,
He calls him Gene.
Oh, you're thinking of Last American Boy Scout. I was talking. Remember Last Action Hero?
Oh yeah, Last Action Hero.
Last American Boy Scout, dude. That I think I want to go watch that after this stream.
I watched it recently. Yeah, I watched it recently, and I hadn't seen it probably since it came out, and it stands up. I mean, all of Tony Scott's stuff does, but yeah, McTiernan did Last Action Hero, which is a great movie. I saw that in the theater, and that's a great movie in the sense that it parodies all of those action. John is parodying all of the movies that defined him, and it's like, who's better than to parody all those movies than McTiernan? Nobody. And that's one of the reasons why that movie is so fun. You think I'm the famous actor Arnold Braunschweiger? It's Schwarzenegger. And Arnold is great at self-deprecating humor. He has a great sense of humor about himself. John has a great sense of humor. That movie's so much fun, and yet at the same time, as kind of tongue-in-cheek as it is, at the end of the movie, when he enters into the real world, the stakes really go up, and they're able to kind of turn it into. It kind of turns into like a real action movie where there's real stakes and real loss and whatnot. So that's always an interesting movie, and I don't remember it did very well. So something tells me that
I don't think it did great. It's got like that niche following. I think it probably did okay because movies were a lot bigger back then, but it probably didn't make much money. Arnold
probably pulled, probably shouldered a lot of that, in helping it succeed. But as I recall, and it also had a big soundtrack. It had Megadeth and I think Alice in Chains did this song. It had a big soundtrack. But I remember at the time that critics really kind of went after it. I think audiences liked it, but I think critics kind of chopped it down, which probably did hurt it at the box office. It's like we were talking about Richard and I. He brought up somebody brought up Hudson Hawk. And that's what I love about the Jawbreakers Army is that you get all these crazy discussions and interesting pop culture discussions and things going on Twitter. With all these people who are supporting us, and we were talking about Hudson Hawk, and it's kind of like I always thought I was one of the only people who actually liked Hudson Hawk, and then Richard's like, I liked it, and I'm like, all these other people are like, I liked it too. They're like posting scenes and gifs and like movie quotes from it, and it's so funny because that's another kind of sleeper, which I think audiences actually liked, but the critics were savage with Hudson. I mean, they absolutely destroyed Bruce over that whole thing, and I could never understand why they took it so damn seriously, because it's a very tongue-in-cheek movie. It's a lot of fun. You ain't curing cancer. What's the big deal,
Right.
He and Danny Aiello are just wonderful together. They're fantastic. And those two villains, Sandra Bernhardt and the other dude, oh my God. I mean, he's so over the top.
Hold on, was it James Coburn?
No, he's in it. I think, but it was the other guy. He's younger. He's the husband of Sandra Bernhardt. He's the guy who's like, he's like, we're here for, to achieve world domination. He's just like
over the top.
Yeah, he plays it so over the top that's what's so much fun, is that it's so tongue in cheek, and she's Sandra Bernhardt, who is a super crazy liberal whack job. She's great in it. She's so funny, and she compliments him in a great way.
Sometimes, like, I just can't stand staring at her when she smiles, dude.
I know.
She's a fucking gap, dude. That fucking gap in her teeth, dude.
She's homely anyway, man. That is not attractive.
Obviously, but that catches your eye on top of it. Like, don't smile.
I know. Yeah, I know. That's a tough thing, man. It's kind of like I'd imagine that's kind of part of her look. She's just accepted it. Maybe she could probably do Invisalign at this point, but then it's like remember Jennifer Grey? She went and had that nose job, and I liked the way she looked before, man. I liked the nose. I didn't have an issue with it. It made her look like her. Now she just looks like nobody. She just looks like sort of like the generic chick you see on the street. So,
right.
It's one of those weird things. It's one of those really strange things.
Yeah. So, I figure in closing, we'll I want to ask a prediction from you.
Okay.
And I asked John this, and he was obviously off because it's gone 100,000 more because he was sitting at 200,000.
Right. Right.
And you may know, are you guys going to hold the Indiegogo store open until publishing or until you get closer?
I think we're going to shut it down when the book is ready to print for the Indiegogo. Okay. I think that's the plan. That's what we discussed. So, until I hear otherwise, Richard's just kind of like, let's just leave it open for people who want to buy it. And because at this point, there's still a lot of room for a publisher to make a good profit. And then also, we're going to offer something different with the published version. It'll have a different cover and maybe some.
Yeah, and it's not going to be signed by Richard or anything like that, unless it's like, at a trade show or something.
Yeah, I mean, there's.
Well, if you can get into a trade show, Jesus.
Yeah, right. Honestly, we'll do something different with the publisher, but also, I'm interested in doing something with the publisher that also gives all of the Indiegogo people incentive to come and buy the published version because, comics is collectibles, and a lot of people like to have both versions. So we're gonna work out something to where we're gonna offer either some kind of a hardcover, like a paper overboard cover, kind of like Clinton Cash has and Thump, with I think the published version. That's where I'd like to see it go, and also a different cover. Maybe something that John and I do together potentially. I don't know. But really, I want to build as much incentive for the fans to want to go out and buy the published version as well and have that next to the Indiegogo, because they're both kind of historical. They're going to be historical in a way, things to own, because this was such a historical event. We're the largest crowdfunded comic in the history. Jamal Eagle the other day tried to correct me on that, and he referenced some crowdfund that raised $1 million for a webcomic. And
it's a fucking webcomic. It's not a published comic.
That's not a published comic. I draw the line between comic books and graphic novels and webcomics. And I responded back to him nicely. I said, Jamal, I have a different opinion, but that's not a comic. That's a webcomic. This is, Vox Day held the record for the largest crowdfunded, and he's doing multiple books, which is a little bit different than what we're doing. But at this point, we're at the top of the pyramid. With Jawbreakers, it's the largest crowdfunded in the history of crowdfunding. I think that's big news within the industry. You wouldn't know it, and it just kind of shows you, just the unbelievable bias within the mainstream media of the comic book industry. It's kind of similar to how they treat Trump. They never report on him, and when they do, it's usually just pure negative crap.
Yeah, so, just spin.
Exactly. So it's interesting. It's funny because since we have sort of a rainbow of politics within Jawbreakers, right, left, center, apolitical, in between. Some people have remarked that it says a lot that the only place that Jawbreakers has really gotten mainstream coverage has been in center-right news, whether it's the Federalist and John De La Rose article or Lucas Nolan's article in Breitbart. Breitbart's probably going to cover Jawbreakers again, probably this week or soon. There's another story cooking there, but it's funny. It's like that's the state of the industry. You have to rely on essentially quote unquote right-wing news to get the truth out.
I actually am working on an article. I do some side writing with revengeofthesiths.com. And they pretty much give me free reign because I'm doing it for free for them. They're buddies,
Yeah.
And so it's good for cross promo. So I'll probably throw up an article with you guys, the Kickstarter, talk about just all the bullshit that you've been through and how it grew to where it is. Plus, I'll toss on
Mm-hmm.
these interviews so people can actually, hear from the talking heads
Great
themselves.
idea. Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, bounding in the comics has been great. Bleeding Fool's been great. All of the podcasts and the live streams that I've done, it's all, it gets back to that guerrilla marketing that we were talking about.
Yep.
This is sort of how you do it. You're interacting with fans. You're going direct to them. You're talking to them. You're developing a relationship and rapport with them. It's what Richard's done for a year. I'm playing catch up with everybody, getting to know everybody. But it's been a lot of fun so far, and my following has increased, which has been great because I love seeing interacting. Yeah, it's fun, man. Everybody's just got a great attitude, and they're really supportive. They love what we're doing, and I feed off that because I want to do so much more. I want to create so much more for everyone, and I've always known that that the audience was there, and I've always had, I think, a good pulse. A reading on the pulse of the audience as to what they want. And so all of this, from Clinton Cash to Thump to My Hero Academia to now Jawbreakers, just reaffirms everything that I thought was correct. And so that's, for me, that gives me the drive to get out there and develop more projects and talk to more people and try my hardest to, get more content out there for all of you, because, at the end of the day, my attitude is I want to create what I think is cool. I want to create what I would buy on the shelf. It just so happens that my taste is very similar to the Jawbreakers Army, to My Hero Academia, Thump. I mean, and like I said, I think there's a huge crossover here. I went on Twitter today and I said, how many Jawbreakers fans are also Thump fans and follow at POTUS Thump and read Thump, and I got a huge reaction. So there's a crossover there, man. And I think that, like I said, if there's a way that all of these different entities that we've created, that the audience can fold into one, we've got enough to do monthly titles, or to at least put out graphic novels in volumes. I really believe that. I think this audience is much bigger than any of us really realize. And, I'm just basing that off of 8,000 backers.
Well, and you look at it right now. So, and I'm just basing it on the numbers we did tonight. They've been really low. You know why? Well, because Diversity has a stream running, and he's had a stream running for the last hour and a half. So he's doing his Sunday comic thing.
That bastard, he's competing with us.
Yeah, but it is what it is, because I know a lot of people will roll over after, and watch the after stream.
Yeah, exactly. So it's great. But yeah, man, I mean, between he and John and I,
and he's gone up 14,000 subscribers since the SJW started flipping their shit on him. So obviously there's people out there who do not agree with what they're saying, and whether or not they 100% love comics, or maybe they just want to back someone who's going to stand up for themselves, like you guys.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys have all been fucked by the industry. And honestly, I hadn't bought a book in quite a while. In a very long
I don't
time.
know how many times I keep hearing that. I haven't bought a book in 20 years. I haven't bought a book in 25 years. I gave up comics 30 years ago, or I gave up comics 5-10 years ago. I keep hearing this over and over again. And I feel the same way. I'm with you. I'm with everybody out there who has just sort of opted out. And the great thing is that, we're giving you something to opt into. And that's really what,
when you're building that feeling of community again, that was the
Mm-hmm.
comic book industry. And it's not just community that's based on,
it's enthusiasm. It's enthusiasm, because we all, we're all kind of keyed into the same vision. We all want the same thing. And I think all of us have a clear idea of what we want, just based on what we know we don't want. Marvel continues to kind of produce things that we don't want, we don't like. And, from a marketing standpoint, and from being able to create things, identifying the audience that you don't want, is largely how you can back into the audience that you do. You can figure it out. You can sort of strip it all down to its essentials, and that is in a lot of way what I've done with projects that I've cultivated and helped produce, and I think that's also where Richard's come from. You know, it just so happens that all of us kind of want the same thing, and that's unique. It's interesting. You know, Marvel's created this gigantic vacuum, basically, and it's sitting there waiting for somebody to step into it. And I believe that I stepped into it with Clinton Cash, with Thump. Tim and Mark and I did it with My Hero Academia, and now Richard and John and I are doing it with Jawbreakers. And there's going to be more projects from me and others that are going to fill that vacuum. And it's a big vacuum, man. It's a big swath of the culture. I talk about it in that Breitbart article about how this is kind of the same thing that Roseanne is doing. You know, Roseanne sees a vacuum. She sees an underserved audience that's largely mocked and held in contempt. And she said, you know what, I'm going to go and I'm going to make my show for them. Exactly. And really, you know, and she in a way, she's kind of making it for everybody, except the fringe on the right and the left, especially the fringe left. But really, she is accepting an audience that has been kind of mocked and abandoned. You see that with Last Man Standing coming back.
Yep.
So I don't think these are coincidences that you're seeing these patterns within the culture. And it just shows me more evidence that we're on the right track. You know, we're on to something here with all of these properties and books that have come out or are in the wheelhouse or like Jawbreakers and Red Rooster and all this fun stuff that is all in the wheelhouse as far as being produced and coming out soon. And there's all kinds of stuff that I don't even know about, probably that is also going to be introduced out there. So it's good stuff, man. I mean, it's an exciting time to be in comics. I know that it seems kind of chaotic, but it's kind of creative chaos, which is a good thing. So out of this chaos will come some semblance of order. And I think that it's going to be an industry that caters more closely to the customer and has a better relationship with the customer. And books like Jawbreakers that is organic and grows from the grassroots is something that I just think that these Marvel and DC are such big corporate entities now. They're they've become very much out of touch. And that's just sort of the risk you run when you go full-blown corporate.
Yep. And you're pivoting and pushing and spewing one narrative. But kill one group.
They do that in the comics, but then they have another narrative in the movies. And it's starting to look like that's starting to change. You know, now you're going to get America Chavez, in up on the screen, and you're getting, I don't know what this new, this new phase that's coming from Marvel is going to be, and if they're going to start to take a different turn. But so far, what I've seen, largely from Marvel with all these movies are pretty right of center, just kind of basic hero villain, good versus evil, black hat, white hat stuff. So they start to deviate from that and start doing what they're doing in the comics. I think that that's going to hurt them at the box office.
Oh, they definitely can't do that because I don't know if Disney would allow that, and they would screw themselves, to be quite honest.
Yeah,
you can't get the only thing DC has going for it in the way of live action or anything is the shit CW does. They're the only ones that are putting out good DC based stuff. And granted, it's like it's story, it's drama, it's all that shit mixed in. But when was the last time you were going to see a hero like Green Arrow have a mainstay movie or the Legends of Tomorrow? That they're doing good stuff over there for television.
Definitely.
You're not going to see a huge push.
The Flash too.
That fucking and they picked a great person to play him. He does.
They did
such a good job.
He's fantastic. He's so much better than the one in Justice League. God, that kid just drives me nuts.
Well, I don't know why they didn't just bring him on to play the Flash.
I don't know, man. You
He
know,
looks like him. He looks
none of
like
it
the
makes
traditional drawing.
none of it makes any sense to me whatsoever. There's just no rhyme or reason for any of this stuff. These, you know, these studios are just basically loan operators, and the publishing, they're complete separate entities. They don't talk to each other. They don't coordinate with each other. They have nothing to do with each other, and it's part of the schism that's going on in the industry. It's part of the the breakdown from big screen to the page. And frankly, they should be they don't have
closer.
They need to be working closer. They need to be planning together. They need to be using artists that can emulate what's on the screen, on the page. So when the kid comes out of Avengers or comes out of Justice League and walks into the comic book store, he sees something identifiable. He's got a frame of reference that is verifiable and that's evident and obvious in front of him. Again, this is all about selling things. Marvel doesn't understand how to sell. They do to a very fringe group, and they're doing a great job of it. If you like sales that you haven't seen since you went bankrupt in the late 90s, I guess that's quite a high bar they've set for themselves. But it's all about the visual. Comics are a visual medium, and if you don't have an image that can compel somebody to go and pick up the book and at least flip through it, you've failed. You've completely failed. And that's what I see with a lot of these covers. I just think to myself, it used to be that you would put all of your effort and your energy into a cover, and you would open it up to subpar work, subpar artist. These days you have the crappy cover, and then you open it up and you have crappy interior art. So it's like a double whammy. It's like I can't even count on being deceived anymore with like a beautiful cover, and then I open it up and I'm like, So I mean, it's just sort of like it's like double fail, Marvel, fail. It just sucks. And they can do so much better. I know they can. I'm starting to think that this has more to do with not having a budget. I just look at all these titles and I just think to myself, there is so much talent out there that's not being utilized. And maybe they just can't pay any artists, a living wage anymore. It's another thing where I love the left and their hypocrisy. It's so easy to point out. When was the last time you heard somebody on the left complain about the wages at Marvel, which haven't been increased in 20 years? Why don't we ever hear the left complain about a livable wage at Marvel? I never hear that. No, he never will. Even the people that work there for pittance, their rates suck. They completely suck. If you're not Justin Ponser, Laura Martin, Mark Morales, if you're not like a super A-lister working on a super A-list book, a flagship book, their rates are garbage. And frankly, you can see that. That comes across on the page. It's evident within a lot of their titles, which all sort of look like, like crappy Vertigo books or something. Like, I just don't even understand what's going on over there. But they can do better, and they need to spend some money and start hiring some really talented people. And John and I talked about this a lot, that they really need to bring back, more of a commercial look to all of their stuff, the same way they have a very commercial look to their movies and all of their merch that I see everywhere, from Target to Walmart. All that stuff has a certain look and a commercial look. And then I go in the comic book store and I see the exact opposite, and it's just sort of like, if I was a kid, I got no incentive to buy these books. They look like shit. The characters that I watch on screen aren't represented, and frankly, as a parent, I don't want them reading about a lot of this left-wing ideology and all of this subversive nonsense. I'm going to plop them down and let them watch G.I. Joe and Thundercats. And have
old Thundercats,
old Thundercats, and have a more traditional childhood like I did. And because frankly, those cartoons, they raised my generation right. We all turned out really great. From G.I. Joe to Silverhawks to Thundercats to He-Man, you know, and everything else in between. Those cartoons had a really positive impact on all of us.
Yeah,
You know?
and you also look at it as the whole shift in dynamic with a lot of shit when it comes to pushing out
Yeah.
participation, all this other garbage.
Mm-hmm.
So lastly, you did we kind of divulged what's your total volume prediction? How many
Oh,
units at the end of the Indiegogo?
shit, man. You know what? Honestly, I had no idea.
You don't have a good
You know,
wager?
John, let's see.
Let's say because you're going to try to push it out
Yeah,
by August
let me
and
look at it.
we're
Where is
at
it
five
right now?
we're on 520 and it is at it's at 311.
311,000 and 8,099 backers. You know, I think you could reach 400. I don't think that that's crazy. I've seen it move really fast. You know, and if we get some more coverage out of Breitbart and some other, you know, some big media hits, which you know I'm working on. I think, you know, the more eyes on this thing, you know, the bigger it's going to go. And frankly, the more resistance we get from the industry, the more Streisand effect you're going to get, and that kind of rallies the troops as well. But you know, I'd love to see it. You know, at this point, the money is the money. The money is the money. You know, I'm really kind of focused on the backers. I would love to see this thing hit 10,000 backers. That would be amazing.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, that's what I was more aiming for. 10,000 on Indiegogo would be freaking.
It would be because you know what I mean. That's kind of like that's a great base of an audience to have identified and to have have basically pre-sales. I think that would be.
Someone pointed out something really good, and you might have you have a little sway in others. You should try and reach out to Dave Rubin. He's a center leftist, but I think he'd be a good platform for you guys. Really big, a lot of pull in the industry, and I mean worldwide. You know, so
yeah, I like him. He's definitely an honest left of center guy. He's very rational. He's a very practical guy. So yeah, I definitely would love to talk to him. And you know, I've heard that mentioned before, but yeah, I don't know if I know anybody that knows him personally, but I can put the feelers out and see if I can. You know,
and I can pull it from one of my fellow creators who I actually have a decent relationship from. I'll ask him if he has his business email and stuff, so you can reach out that way. Because I think
great, man.
I think he has it around somewhere.
Awesome.
So on that note, guys, I mean, I'm down to have another conversation if you're down the road in a month or so or whatever, and bring you guys on. So if you haven't yet, or if you're just watching this not live, check out the Indiegogo for Jawbreakers Lost Souls. It is in my bio, as well as Brett's link to his Twitter, where you can find upcoming and information and everything else. People are asking, no, I don't do super chats, but I do t-shirts. If you want to support the channel, that's a good way to go about it. And on that note, guys, thank you so much for watching. And if you're new here, throw a subscription my way. Thank you and good night.